Hey, happy Friday. This week we talk about what Trump means for tech, we talk about why the Mozilla Foundation laid off 30% of its employees, and why the maker of Gorilla Glass is getting sued over antitrust issues. Welcome to the Friday Checkout. This video is sponsored by Nebula. Okay, for my first story of the week, I don't know if you've noticed, but America elected a new president, and here's a rundown for what we think that might mean for tech. Perhaps the clearest promise of Trump was the idea of wide-ranging tariffs on imports, and since America imports basically all of its laptops, smartphones, game consoles, and more, the prices of those could soar if he follows through. A promised 60% tariff on all Chinese goods would be especially brutal. Laptop prices are particularly sensitive and could nearly double under the worst estimates, and meanwhile video game console prices are expected to rise by up to 40% and smartphone prices by up to 26%. If that happens, moving production to Mexico, Vietnam, India, or even the US would become even more popular, although of course that would take years. And Apple, for example, already has at least a small production line for every one of their products outside of China, which I bet they're going to push even harder on now. Now, tariffs being as high as he promised seems a little bit unlikely to me because I think even hardcore Trump voters would not enjoy basically everything getting more expensive in their lives, even if some of those expenses are then potentially offset by some tax cuts. And also note that tariffs are of course an extremely regressive sort of tax, so they hurt people who are poor the most and people who are rich the least, and so millions and millions of people would definitely notice if tariffs were extremely high all of a sudden. Anyway, Joe Biden's Signature Chips Act, which made a big push for building up domestic manufacturing for semiconductors, is not expected to be cancelled, so money is expected to keep flowing to companies like Intel. And meanwhile, the huge antitrust cases that Lina Khan's FTC have been pursuing are surprisingly popular on both sides of the political aisle, so they might continue in some form, but reports are that the very pro-business Trump is expected to shift course and might even stop existing breakup plans like the one planned against Google. Meanwhile, mergers and acquisitions we expect to be back on the menu, which of course big tech companies and venture capitalists, for example, are extremely happy about. And Trump is just generally expected to let companies do their thing, except for when he personally wants to punish someone. This is probably why tech CEOs like Zuck were quick to congratulate him, even though just weeks earlier, Trump said that they could spend the rest of their lives in prison. Dismantling the Biden-era safeguards around AI and self-driving seemed like a fairly obvious bet, and Bitcoin also jumped massively after the election as Trump is expected to deregulate crypto and even floated the idea of the state choosing to buy some crypto after cozying up to the industry. Meanwhile, TikTok apparently saw Trump's victory as their app's best hope as well after some billionaire friends of his reportedly convinced him to go from critic to supporter. So in general, a lot of big tech companies seem pretty happy right now, and the hardest thing to predict is what will happen around Elon. One report said that Musk already lobbied Trump to hire SpaceX employees for top Department of Defense roles, which seems very likely to happen, but meanwhile EVs are a pretty big question mark. Trump specifically said that he would, quote, end the electric vehicle mandate on day one. He said that, quote, EVs don't work, and he's widely expected to weaken the Biden administration's new tailpipe emission standards, which would further weaken EVs. But Elon is, of course, in the building now, so Tesla stock jumped massively and significantly outperformed even other American car brands, which means that investors expect Musk's company to receive some kind of special favor for his support of Trump anyway. Maybe Trump is gonna remove the tax credit from every EV except from Teslas? Something like that? Who knows? It's gonna be a wild ride anyway. Okay, and for my second story of the week, Mozilla is in trouble again. Specifically, the Mozilla Foundation announced that they will lay off 30% of their staff, which consists of 120 people. Among other things, they will completely eliminate the nonprofit's advocacy group, whose job was to advocate for a free and open web, and this was Mozilla's second big cut this year. Now, I have, of course, literally just made a whole TechAltar video on Mozilla's long decades of missteps, their weird finances, and how the new CEO plans to change things, so watch that if you haven't yet. But as for these layoffs specifically, we have to add a little bit of context as well. The Mozilla Foundation is the non-profit parent organization under which the Mozilla Corporation and MZLA Technologies exist, that are for-profit entities that are actually developing Firefox, Pocket, Mozilla VPN, Thunderbird, etc. So this layoff specifically affects the parent, meaning that theoretically Firefox and Co. should be fine. That said, the product organizations had their own round of layoffs earlier as well, so perhaps not exactly fine. Anyway, for my third story of the week, now Corning, the maker of the extremely popular Gorilla Glass, is involved in an antitrust investigation, and the allegations are pretty wild. According to the accusations, Corning made agreements with mobile OEMs that included exclusive sourcing obligations requiring OEMs to source all or nearly all of their glass from Corning. Those then got exclusivity rebates if they agreed, making it very attractive for them to not buy at all from competitors. And Corning also obliged OEMs to report to Corning on competitive offers, and then allowed OEMs to accept that offer only if Corning fails to match the price. If those allegations are true, then they sound extremely similar to the kind of behavior that Google and others got in trouble for earlier. And better yet, Corning also has similar exclusivity obligations with producers of raw glass, and not just the phone companies, which prevented those from challenging Corning's patents, so the company went both up and downstream. Now, it's the European Union who's doing the investigation, who have not suddenly decided that they don't like antitrust investigations overnight, so we'll see how this goes. Okay, and as for the release monitor, we only have a very short one again this week, and we're starting with the DJI Goggles N3. These are like a pair of VR glasses for drones that feature an ultra-wide screen with an expanded field of view and a defogging fan at $229. Pretty cool. And second, Leica also just announced a laser TV as a mini projector called the Leica Cine Play 1. This $3,800 machine should give you a 4K image at up to 300 inches, both indoors and outdoors, with up to 3000 ASNI lumens. Pretty cool. And on to the brief, we start with some good news for Samsung for once. The Galaxy S24 actually made it to the top 10 best-selling list of smartphones in Q3 2024, making it the first time since 2018 that a Galaxy S series flagship made it to the top 10 list in this quarter. Nice! And still with Samsung, Bixby is getting a major update with next-generation generative AI updates. But weirdly enough, they're starting with a preview in China. Samsung is an extremely small player in China, so this is kind of odd, but okay. Then, in pretty brutal news, Nvidia took Intel's spot in the famous Dow Jones Industrial Average Index on the stock market after 25 years of Intel being included. Looking at the stock comparisons over the last 5 years paints a pretty grim picture for Intel versus what is now the world's most valuable company. And moving on, Nintendo confirmed that the Switch 2 will be backwards compatible with Switch games, implying that it might even retain a physical card slot. The company also says that it has sold 146 million Switch consoles in 7.5 years, making this on track to be their best-selling console ever very soon, and Pokemon sales on the Switch have reached 99 million copies as well. Wild! Meanwhile, Microsoft also had a busy week, starting with a new version of their emulator, which could bring more games to Windows on ARM, and could also generally improve compatibility, which of course would be welcome. And then in less reassuring news, the company again recalled its already recalled recall feature, now delaying it until Christmas because it apparently needs even more time to get it right. Ouch. And meanwhile, Copilot Pro was also killed off as an independent subscription, and its features are instead being bundled into Microsoft 365, which back in the good old days we used to call the Microsoft Office subscription. There is a slight price bump for the bundle, but this will even include AI features for Notepad and Paint. A standalone subscription for regular people at $20 a month always felt a little bit off to me, but including it in the big Office bundle, just like Google does with their Google One bundles and Gemini, I think makes a whole lot of sense. And talking of ChatGPT, OpenAI has just acquired Chat.com, which now redirects to ChatGPT. Apparently, a co-founder of HubSpot claims that he bought the domain for $15.5 million in 2023, and then because he, quote, doesn't like profiting off people he considers friends, he instead chose to become an investor in OpenAI. I think that's a weird way of saying that he traded the domain name for shares. And then also this week, Google apparently accidentally leaked a preview of its own Jarvis AI that can take over computers as an AI agent to click through the internet on your behalf. This sounds pretty much exactly like what Claude's AI agent was set to do as well, and it should come to market in just a few months. Okay, and I don't know about you, but after this election, I'm now once again bracing myself for 4 years of basically non-stop breaking news that are gonna grind my psyche into the dust if I let the social media algorithms have their way with me. I remember the news cycle was a little too intense for my liking the last time. But thankfully, Nebula News is here as a curated newsfeed that replaces the uncontrolled fire hose with a more thoughtful and calm approach. It's a dedicated newsfeed made by some of the internet's best creators, which of course updates you on what's happening in politics, business, tech, and more, but then it also adds important and often missing context. It's a much more structured approach than letting random tweets dictate what you think every few minutes. If you like the Friday checkout, then I think you'll love this, and I'm joined here by the likes of TLDR News and Morning Brew, plus also multiple Nebula exclusive news series now too. And beside the news, Nebula now also features proper Nebula exclusive documentary films like Boomers, a whole documentary by Tom Nicholas on the impact of the baby boomer generation on, well, everything. It's really, really good. Nebula is free of ads and weird trackers, and your subscription helps us create better content for you. And my link, go.nebula.tv/TFC, also brings the cost down to just $3 a month or $36 a year, which is a discount of 40% versus what you'd pay with a generic link. That is a really fair price in my opinion, and if you absolutely hate ongoing subscriptions, you can instead even opt for a lifetime membership. Oh, and we recently also added an option for guest passes, so you can even share your subscription with a friend for a week for free. How cool is that? So check it out, be sure to use my link in the description for a discount that also so Nebula knows that I sent you, and I'll see you over there.